certain stories are meant for animated movies. One cannot simply translate a story from animation to live action because it's meant for animation. It thrives in that environment. It excels at what it is because of how it was originally told. Animated movies should stay animated movies, and live action movies should, for the most part, stay live action.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World! I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome, everybody, to the One-Eyed Film Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Mossberg, and today we got the boys in the studio that we don't have because we record in our rooms. We were reminiscing just a second ago. The last time we did this was, like, the three of us together was Barbenheimer, and which actually wasn't that long ago, and we actually got to be in person, but Josh is a whole time zone ahead of us, and so like a nerd, he has to actually get to bed at a decent time.
I have classes tomorrow.
Did you guys know this little fun fact that is an achievement of mine that I have referenced a couple times on this podcast? Just a few.
You're a lawyer.
No, actually. Interestingly enough, I indeed have a degree in animation.
No way. Really?
There it is.
And
Yes.
I can be a little nerdy about it. Now, I am not an animator. For those of you who are interested, who are nerds like me, I do more visual effects and 3D modeling and stuff like that, not hand-drawn animation. So every time I tell somebody I have a degree in animation, I got to say, I can't draw, but I can appreciate drawings. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Animation is kind of having its own comeback in the era of movies. It obviously kicked off, well, not kicked off. There were some very short films right away when film became a thing, and movies and all that. But very quickly, a man named Walt Disney started realizing that you can draw pictures and make it look like they're moving. And if you play it quickly, it looks like it's moving. And that's where the word movie came from. And kicked off with Snow White, which is kind of funny that we're talking about this now when Snow White is kind of the center of some controversy that we kind of talked about in the Is Hollywood Dead episode. If you haven't listened to that, go listen to that. But that was the start of the animation era. Like, this is something that we had never seen before. Snow White was truly one of its kind to just show what is possible through the drawings, bringing drawings to life. And that developed through not the golden age quite, but the launch of animation through Walt Disney. And then they kind of hit some dull spots, and then they came back and started picking up in 3D animation. And that's where Toy Story really got off the ground with Pixar figuring out how to make a full 3D animated short. And now we got to the point a number of years ago where realism became the big thing that people wanted. And you can really see this in movies like Frozen 2 is the one I really noticed it in. That had some of the most realistic environments I had ever seen. They still had the Disney style characters with the big eyes and the different shaped faces, but the landscape looked incredibly real. If you had just given me a picture of the landscape, it would be no different than taking a picture of the outside. And I think at that point, people started to become tired of it, tired of the realism, because then why don't you just make live action? And then people started making live action. Disney started remaking their live action originals and making them not as good. And we can talk about that later. The thing that made me realize I wanted to talk about this was the rise in stylized animation. And there are a lot of examples in this in recent days. We are, to the core, Into the Spider-Verse stands. I know Josh will admit that.
You two are.
Will doesn't like it.
I don't dislike it, but I
Fake friend. I cannot believe you have. I've known you for 18 years of my life, my dude, and you have not seen a movie that just came out 4 years ago?
No, there's a lot of movies I haven't seen.
Disregarding Will for a second. Josh and I love Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and we're really looking forward to Beyond the Spider-Verse. But that really kind of showed a lot of people what the possibilities with animation were. And the people at Sony did an amazing job bringing that movie into the public eyes easily through the character of Spider-Man. It could have been any other story, any other character, but I think because it was Spider-Man, it got a lot of attention. This blend between 2D and 3D is not new to Into the Spider-Verse. It's been done multiple times. It's actually, I think Josh and I talked about this in Prince of Egypt, a blend between 2D and 3D that was used back in the 90s in Treasure Planet and Prince of Egypt, to name a few. But there's a new twist on it now in the 20s where instead of the backgrounds being 3D and the characters being animated, the backgrounds are drawn and the characters are 3D. And that's in Arcane, that's in Into the Spider-Verse. And Into the Spider-Verse went a step further and did hand-drawn action lines and stylized single frames and all that stuff. That really made people actually interested in animation, along with the small fact that almost everyone knows at this point is that Miles is, before he learns what it is to be Spider-Man, he's animated on twos, which means for every 24 frames you have in a movie, he moves every 2 frames. So one frame for frames 1 and 2, he's the same. For frames 3 and 4, he's the same, and then he looks choppy. That's actually how old anime, well, anime in general, is animated, because they can draw more mileage, is actually what it's called, more pen mileage quicker. Instead of drawing 24 frames, you're drawing half as much so that you can get it out faster. And it still works. You notice a difference, but it still works for sure.
I want to comment on that real quick, because there's just a cool detail as well. I love the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, and then I am going to love Beyond the Spider-Verse. But one thing, what's the guy's name? The punk spider.
Spider-Punk?
It is Spider-Punk.
Spider-Punk.
Broly.
But what's his name in a...
Broly, wasn't it? Like Broly.
What's his name?
Something like a BR, I thought.
I know what you're talking about. Hobie.
Brody?
Hobie.
BBB.
Hobie. Cool thing about Hobie, I mean, in Into the Spider-Verse, we know that at the very beginning, Miles is running at every 2 frames, he goes 1 frame, just 2-to-1 ratio. And that same rule is across basically all characters. Everyone's running at either 2 or 1. That's kind of like the 2 different lines that you can be. Whereas Hobie in Into this or Across the Spider-Verse, he's actually going every 3 frames. So he's like even going against the rules of just the animation, because every 36 frames he only gets 12 frames renewed, or 12 frames of a cycle. And it's just so awesome that people can use just different frame rates, either to their advantage, like you were saying, to have as little pen mileage as possible, but also to like fit it into a story.
I think it started off as pen mileage for things like anime that had to be, you're creating a lot of pictures, a lot of single frames for an entire show. And maybe you only have a certain amount of artists working on it, but it just makes it faster to get it out. Now, when you turn that around and make it into an element that tells the story, is so just chef's kiss. I don't even know what to say for it. It's the whole point I want to talk about and to focus on as we talk about animation here is how even cinematography is the same way. You can use cinematography. You can tell a story through how you frame something, but just as much and even more so through animation, through the styles that you can use, the different techniques to tell the story, such as, Into the Spider-Verse is a great example for Miles to be learning and choppy and struggling at the first part. But as soon as he takes the leap of faith, then he's animated on ones and makes it so much smoother. And that's how you tell a story with animation, instead of just using animation as the output of the story.
Dude, that leap of faith scene is so crisp. You don't realize how awesome Miles is until he's finally moving at 24 frames a second. It's just insane.
You are also a fan of the PS4, PS5 Spider-Man games. The skin that is Miles Morales, the Into the Spider-Verse skin, that also moves at 12 frames per second. And that's so weird seeing that in a real. It's so weird seeing that in a realistic environment like that.
Difficult to fight in though.
Sure, but it's cool
to swing around that way.
I'm gonna be just completely honest. My plebeian brain does not fully understand most of what you're talking about, because I don't have a degree in animation. I just go, "Ooh, look pretty." That's all I care about. Although I do have standards for animation. I do have standards, and we'll probably talk about it. But I do have standards for animation. But it's not. Oh, that's frames going da 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 da. It's like, oh, that's that image, and either I like it or I don't. We'll get into that later.
But like I said, Into the Spider-Verse did not create this style. I know. Well, obviously, we talked about the older version of 2.5D, which is what that's called. I know that, I think it was a movie called Klaus. It was like the origins of Santa or Santa's son or something. It was on Netflix. That was a 2.5D movie where they drew over 3D models. Not new, but just popularized through Into the Spider-Verse. And through that, I believe we saw the incredible surgence of studios wanting this new style, because they saw how well accepted the Into the Spider-Verse movies were. These are movies like Mitchell's vs. the Machines, Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, Arcane followed soon after. Arcane was years in the making. All of these were. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from this year. Have you guys seen that yet?
I have not. I am a broke college student. I need to see it though.
It's so good. I want
to see it so bad.
It's such a good kids movie. I went and saw it this last week. Wow. I got to geek about this for a second.
They finally made them teenagers.
That's one thing. That's just a story thing.
Voice crack.
That's just a story thing, though. This version is so fun to watch. I was distracted by the lights. Now, you can do a bunch of different things with how you draw things. You can see this in Into the Spider-Verse, where if something is out of focus, you can kind of see this with my hand, it's blurry, because that's how cameras work, is the depth of field is different for whatever's closer versus further away. Now, you can do that in different ways with animation. For Into the Spider-Verse, I believe what they did, for the most part, is separated the RGB. And this is getting very nerdy, so hang with me. They separated the RGB or did a double exposure so that there was kind of like, you could see two versions of whatever it is so that it was out of focus. Something that I noticed in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was whenever there was light, the intensity of the light was shown by scribbles. And I got distracted by this very easily. The very strong lights had a strong white back and forth scribble. But then a dull light that maybe glitched or flickered a little bit was just a light little, almost imperceptible little scribble that was toned to the same color as the screen. Like, the different ways that you can use something like a scribble is really cool. And you just see this throughout that whole movie of how it looks like you could freeze it on any frame and it could be a comic page. Same with Into the Spider-Verse. I would say for Arcane, you could freeze it at any frame and it looks like concept art. If you look up concept art for Star Wars or anything like that, you freeze frame it and it looks just grand and elaborate and details that probably won't show up in the end product, but it does. That's a whole thing. I think Puss in Boots it falls into the same line where it's exaggerated. Like, you can see the exaggeration of animation, but it's also very stylized and action lines and all those things. I'm just rambling on now. Somebody else go.
I would say from my perspective, yeah, I've definitely noticed that there is something of a renaissance of sorts, at least in regards to a certain type of the animation, which is what we've been talking about, kind of where it's like 2D has been plastered onto 3D, I'd say. And I've seen that a lot. And I mean, when it comes to me, like, I generally, as long as the movie looks pretty good and looks realistic enough for me, I usually enjoy it. Yeah. I don't know enough to like nerd out, but I just go, oh, it looks good, or nah, I don't really like looking at it, or it's fine.
He is an avid consumer.
I am a midwit. I am the midwit.
That's fine.
Another thing I like to think about, I've watched a few animes in my lifetime. Not a ton. I am not by any means a weeb. No one be offended to that, please. But
just like have like the thing say, be like an image of Josh's face. I am a weeb.
No. Disclaimer: I am not a weeb. I'm not. But we were talking about pen mileage earlier. Something that I also think was kind of cool from the very few animes that I watched. You could tell which episodes were going to be absolutely gnarly just from the very beginning, because some of the styles that they would use for like just normal conversations, lips would barely be moving on the episodes where they had an epic fight going on later, because they were saving all of their pen mileage for that and putting all of the effort and time into that fight scene so that their lips would just be two different frames that they're just going back and forth with. And that kind of animation where you're intentionally making stuff look bad so that you can give a real production in the finish.
Or more or less saving resources.
That kind of idea is awesome. Yeah, saving resources. I guess not intentionally making stuff look bad, because it doesn't look bad. It just looks unanimated.
Yeah. Although I will say, like, I mean, early 2000s CG animation, that was something.
That can go away.
Okay. Actually, I think there's a really good example where you can see the because we've talked about like 2D animation, which again is one of my personal favorites, and that's just in Disney is like kind of like the pinnacle. I think a lot of this of both good and bad versions of like 2D in animation, and how there's been a sort of resurgence with 2D. But maybe we can kind of switch from talking about 2D to maybe CG or computer generated animation, which is quite different. And I don't know, Seth, what your particular expertise is that, but I think it's really interesting to just like see how like CG has kind of developed and become from what it started off as. Because like if you look at like early 2000s, like, you know, it's like the PS1, or just like actually I think that there's a really good example we can use is VeggieTales. Like if you look at early VeggieTales, it's like not the worst, but it's like, wow, that's early CG. And then I was like, yeah, very simple. And then like as you go further on with like more TV shows in the VeggieTales, it's like you can see how they get progressively better, for lack of a word, I'd say, and like they get more smooth. And like it's just, I think that's just like a really good example of how you can see like CG when it started off is very blocky, and or even like the Toy Story, because that's kind of what helped promote CGI and stuff like that, where it's like very blocky and not one dimensional, but like a certain type of look, and then it gets more smooth, more realistic, to the point of where, you know, in like Frozen 2, it's like that basically looks like real water, or a real tree at this point. So
I don't know, Will. Why would you ask me about that? It's not like I have any expertise in that area.
I don't know. I don't know if you have a particular expertise in that.
I have a degree in animation, so not pull the flip card on you. No,
he was the one teaching your class, Seth. Didn't you notice? It was Josh all along, and I would have gotten away with it too.
It's actually funny that you bring up PS1 games. As someone who is an avid video game player, it is kind of cool to see kind of the crazy amount of 3D animation or the computer generated images that we can make on video games. For example, Wii Sports. Everything is super simple textured. That's not even that old of a game. You think even back further to Mario Kart or to some of the original Crash Bandicoot. The textures on there are atrocious. Yet when I was a kid playing them, they looked pretty baller, not gonna lie.
They were very low polygon and didn't have a lot of definition or a lot of smoothing. It just was very sharp. Well, actually, the video games weren't sharp. The edges were sharp, but blurry because the video games were at like 480p.
Yeah.
I'm kind of intrigued, Josh. Like, what's kind of like been your experience? Because like you play a lot of games for, like, again, you're an avid gamer. Well, what kind of has been like your experience with like games, so like how they've changed an animation style? Like, what's kind of been like the general trend you've seen, and like has it kind of reached a point where it can't go anymore, or what's kind of been like new trends you've seen in video games?
So some of the first video games that I ever played were computer games. The specific Candyland one. It is very basic animation. It's like a menu sort of video game that you're just selecting stuff, but boy did it look bad. But back then it was the coolest thing I had ever seen because I'm controlling everything that's happening. Obviously you have very simple stuff like Tetris or Pong, which is just shapes. You can't get shapes wrong. I didn't grow up on that. That's way before my time. But some of the first games that I actually started playing that were probably like actually what most people would consider video games would have been Fallout 3. I even played Fallout 2, Fallout New Vegas, or Oblivion. Those games looked awesome compared to what I was originally playing. And the trend of actually being able to do stuff in like a 3D area, being able to go up hills. I remember that was revolutionary when Doom first came out with that. Was crazy. Like, yeah.
This update adds elevation.
You can go on stairs. That was crazy.
Level 2, literally.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like what happened. Like, that's what I'm experiencing with like Skylanders, because in like the first Skylanders game, you can't like jump or anything like that, and then like the later ones you can. Yeah. It's like you can jump.
Against my better judgment, I played Doom when I was a kid, but then again, the animation back then wasn't bad at all, and I didn't even have the audio on, so I wasn't listening to heavy metal when I was playing it. But I was killing demons, so you can call me a pretty avid Christian.
That should be like another quote. I was killing demons.
But anyways, I remember playing video games, or specifically Doom. It was definitely not Doom Eternal. Because if you see how far Doom has evolved, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, you can play Doom literally on a calculator now. But playing those games and just having very simple everything and just putting so much time into that, and then eventually getting into Skyrim and everything like that, just everything has evolved so much to where I'm playing games and I'm like, this game doesn't have a ray tracing. Trash. You know? I'm looking at some of the stuff, specifically. One of the biggest breakthroughs I think that we've had in video game history is Horizon Zero Dawn. It's a pretty good game. Story is very well thought out, one not so much, but the ability to have everything in front of you being the only thing that's loaded and just optimizing it so that whatever you're looking at is there. Everything behind you is unloaded except for hitboxes. That's basically it. So the textures in Horizon Zero Dawn were amazing. I remember playing that on my PS4 and thinking that it was unreal because everything looked so realistic. And it's crazy that I've come from playing Skyrim where you can literally glitch through walls using a plate to having something so realistic. And my experience with 3D animation has definitely been very abrupt because of how quickly we've moved from that Mario Kart to what we are now.
Yeah, it's definitely been like really fast. And just like about the Horizon Zero Dawn thing, I think it's really funny because I think you can kind of tell the difference because I don't play video games a lot. So whenever I've gone to your house and we're in your basement, you've got your giant 4K TV and you put on like Horizon Forbidden West, I like you can kind of see the disparity between me and Josh, because Josh like is still amazed, but he's seen it and I've like never seen it before. It's like, my goodness, that looks so real and like awesome and cool. And it's just
William's
crazy.
Drooling over in the corner. The flavors are melting in my eyes. I will admit, I had a slight crush on Aloy. Something about her taking down gigantic machines was quite attractive to me. I don't know.
I don't know that you're
They
gonna get a
made her-
woman that
made her a lesbian, dude.
Okay. Oh goodness, can I rant about that? I did watch the cutscenes for like the latest DLC, and she kissed a girl.
For anyone who's curious about, sometimes I feel like I need to explain 3D terms to the plebes who don't know anything. For ray tracing that Josh was talking about is like mirrors and really detailed lighting. And that's something that's new in the last couple years that games have begun to develop. But Will, you asked about how I've seen animation change, and obviously I haven't. But in my history of animation studies that I've done, just in my fun time, I don't know anything more than just as a hobby, obviously. The Toy Story was
definitely
really
not academically at all.
Toy Story was really
You
groundbreaking.
didn't get it to be an animation.
No, who would do that? It's a dumb, it's like, how would you even use that? Like, go work at a summer camp or something?
Start a podcast.
Start a podcast. Toy Story was really groundbreaking for the 3D animation and that type of culture because nothing had been done at a full length scale. There had definitely been visual effects in movies for sure, but it took years to get one scene done in certain situations because it was just so computationally heavy for computers. And so as computers got better and as people at Pixar literally wrote 3D animation code in order to make Toy Story, they were able to make it more accessible. And that's really changed in the last 20 years with the personalization of animation through even Adobe releasing products that help 2D artists and things like Blender that are free for 3D artists to be able to really make this stuff at home. And that's something I do once in a while with my projects. And one person that I want to point people to see what's possible on an individual level is Ian Hubert. He does an incredible job making personal short films. He's made a couple different mini short films that are all connected somehow, but they're really cool. Go check him out on YouTube. But he made them. He had other people help him with sound and acting and stuff. All of that was done in-house without a studio. And that's the type of stuff that is kind of becoming normal now, is people understanding this way of creating art. One thing that I enjoyed doing as a nerd who liked animation was look at Toy Story 4 versus Toy Story 1. And there was a big comparison, especially with animals, because there was a dog in the first one, Sid's dog. Or no, it wasn't Sid's dog. It was Andy's dog. There's a dog in the first one, and there's a cat in the second one. And that's like comparing apples to oranges, blah, blah, blah. But they're like, how do you render them? And the dog looked like a wax figure that they bent out of shape to try and make it look like it was running. And then the cat had the same, I would say the same thing that I did about Frozen 2. It looked almost real. Like it could have been filmed. And so that was just so cool. People debate whether they should have just ended Toy Story with Toy Story 3. I kind of like Toy Story 4, but it was good to see the animation differences. Same with Incredibles. Now Incredibles 2, kind of mid, but the animation differences between faces and how they were able to express themselves is a great comparison to see how far it's come. Now, if you really want to get nerdy, if you let me rant for a while, there's things like textures, there's resolution in modeling, there's a bunch of different techniques that they've developed that make it look better. That is all the way from, just using higher resolution textures, putting more detail into how they sculpt a face. Motion capture has been a big thing, especially when you think of the Clone Wars. That's another one that has spanned many eras of animation, where the first one will look very different than the last season, especially because the last season was delayed. But they motion captured a lot of the lightsaber fights, especially for the last season, and then use that in the animation to put 3D characters on that, rather than just animating it by hand. So that's having people act out the lightsaber fights and then recording that data in a computer and then basically slapping on, say, Darth Maul and Ahsoka to those character poses and them fighting. Like that's one way that things have just become easier when it comes to producing animation. With that said, I don't know what goes. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say I don't know what the next step beyond this is, because we already got there with Into the Spider-Verse. Now, I think I mentioned this on a different episode. I don't want Into the Spider-Verse to become the next normal, that style, that 2.5D looks like a living cartoon. It's a good option for variety. We need more variety in animation rather than more realism. And I think studios are starting to realize it. And I realized this thought when I saw the trailer for Wish. And I don't know if you've seen this. It's just released as of recording this. It released a couple days ago. It's Disney's stylized movie that they realized they were behind and they needed to hop on the bandwagon. And it looks good. it looks like a Disney movie stylized in the same way that Arcane or Into the Spider-Verse is, not to this extreme of a comic book style, but when the characters start moving, you really see it and you're like, Disney, you realize you're falling behind, you need to get on the bandwagon. And I think Josh is watching it right now. I can see it in his eyes.
I've already seen it, so I know.
Will knows what I'm talking about.
It was really
I've seen
bass boosted on my end. I was listening. It was just imagine a place.
Now,
yeah,
I don't want it to be the normal. And I think people are going to go to the other end of the spectrum and make it normal. I don't want that. I want it to continue to be variety. It doesn't, you still need a good story to tell through your animation. You can't just have your animation hold up your entire story. Let's say Disney made a really bad movie like Strange World, but it was in the style of Into the Spider-Verse. Now, unfortunately, I think people would still like it because it was cool, and they're unfortunately like our friend Will over here, who only likes the pretty visuals, but they're...
I have a rant coming about anime. You're going to find that's not true.
Okay, sounds good. That, like I said before, animation can enhance the story when used properly. That's also seen, like we brought up anime a bunch of times, with extreme poses. And that's something you spend a couple days on in certain study in animation when you're studying that type of stuff, is elongated poses with what would be extreme lenses if you were using a camera, but it would seem like a super long arm or like a super big wind up as they're coming in for a big blow, like things like that are what you learn to use to enhance the story rather than just tell it. And that's also where live action remakes are a problem, because you can't just copy the story into live action. It was made for an animated format for the magic of animation. And that's something I think almost everyone has seen now, because mic drop from Josh.
Say louder for the people in the back.
Bars.
That's the word.
Bars.
Yeah, let's go. Bars.
Certain stories are meant for animated movies. One cannot simply translate a story from animation to live action, because it's meant for animation. It thrives in that environment. It excels at what it is because of how it was originally told. It doesn't have the same magic, literally, because sometimes animation seems like magic. It doesn't have the same magic as the animation if you're telling it in live action with characters. Like, that's where a lot of people struggled with Will Smith's Genie or some of the castle characters from Beauty and the Beast. Like, that doesn't look right as realistic. It's meant to be animated. That frustrates me so much whenever I keep seeing the remakes. And animated movies should stay animated movies, and live action movies should, for the most part, stay live action, unless you're going to enhance it somehow. I don't even think remakes, we should talk about remakes a whole different time, because remakes, you should just continue the story instead of making the same thing. I'll save that rant for a little bit. I want to get to Will's rant because
sometimes you don't have to continue the story too. Sometimes you
make a new story. Make a brand new story that has nothing to do with the original.
This is the eternal failure of Hollywood. They never know when to end.
Exactly.
But that's nothing new. We can say that for another time.
Will, I want to get to your rant because you keep referencing it, and I'm very curious. We've been talking off and on about anime. Yes, I have never watched an anime. Josh has a little bit of experience. I don't know what Will's is.
I think I have quite a bit of experience, considering my sister was a weeb.
Which one?
Did she listen to this? Probably not.
Have you ever seen like anything from like Bollywood?
Yeah, that's just funny on a different level.
Okay,
yeah, those are just hilarious.
Don't hit on Bollywood though.
I know,
Bollywood is gold. I will watch anything from there.
Yeah, you don't even. The best part about all that stuff is like you don't have to understand what they're saying. You just have to watch it, and you're entertained. You have no idea what's going on, but that's fine.
I don't need content. I don't need anything. I just watch. Exactly.
Okay, but yes.
But my experience with anime is enough. I've seen quite a few animes. Most of them are only like 8 or 9 episodes long, similar to Arcane, I would say. But they're Japanese made. I watch all of mine subbed, because I read the whole time. No hate on anyone who watches it dubbed. Sometimes you don't want to read the whole time. But I do have enough for me to have an opinion on this, I believe.
Do you have an opinion enough for a rant? No. The answer is no, because Will has the floor.
I do have the floor. And I'll basically just say it. I don't really like anime. I wouldn't necessarily say I hate it, but I kind of do.
Thank you guys so much for listening. That'll be... He said what he needs to say.
How many animes have you seen?
Surprised a little bit of a good amount, actually, all things considered. Because I did have a Pokemon phase. Like, you remember that. You remember I had that.
Name 3 other than Pokemon.
Okay, I don't think Avatar counts. There's the one I just watched recently.
Avatar does count.
I have seen Gate, a little bit of that, and then other just various ones from all over the internet. So here's the thing, though. Let me put this there. Okay, I have like a weird love hate. I have a bit of a love.
More, my man.
I have some I've written down. Don't worry. I do have like a bit of a love hate relationship with anime because here's the thing: is I do find it in a certain way to be very beautiful, but at the same time kind of weird, and there's parts about it that I don't like. So what I mean is that anime is very, like, especially when it comes to like certain picturesque like settings. So if they're doing like a sunset or something like that, those are often very beautiful. But usually my issue with anime generally comes down to characters and how they portray that. So because I mean, on the one hand, I can find anime to be rather beautiful in regards to scenery, and it's very colorful and artistic. Like, this is just like I think there's a lot of images of anime that you could use for a laptop image, that type of an idea, kind of like Arcane, how you talk about, you could just take a picture and it would look very nice. But the thing about anime is that I just kind of like how the people look, generally speaking. And I've got like an image right here. Let me share quick, if you don't mind.
This just in, William doesn't like Asians.
I have friends who are Asian. So like, I'm just using this as an image, but like this like kind of disturbs me, this type of how anime makes people look, because it's like the nose are too small, the eyes are way too big, but which, by the way, that actually has a thing in Japanese culture. I think it's because like eyes are seen as relation to the soul or something like that. But it's still just like this like makes me go, oh, that's slightly unnerving somehow. I'm not sure how I like that.
I would like to know what anime you got this from.
I have no idea. I just looked up image. So like I said, like there's also like different flavors of anime. So like Studio Ghibli or Ghibli, I don't know how to say that. Like, yeah, like there's not like there's different styles of anime. How about that?
No, I like flavors.
Okay. Anyways, continue. Where was I now?
Flavors of anime.
Okay. Yeah. So
That's a shirt. That's a shirt. Flavors of anime.
But I mean, like, it is somewhat of a fact. Like, there are different distinctive styles of anime, like Studio Ghibli or Ghibli or whatever. I can never say how it writes, but like those ones.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I find like those ones to be. I don't generally dislike them as much, or I find them very nice, like in generally speaking, style. Like the thing for like me is like I'm a realist essentially, I'd say, and so this range is gonna expand a little bit. But my main issue with animes are kind of twofold, and so it's basically because I've already talked about the visuals, like how they make people look is just unnerving to me because it doesn't look realistic. Like the eyes are big, the nose are tiny, the noses are small. They that's how they talk. Like seriously, that's how the lips move. I'm not wrong. And so that's just kind of unnerving, but that's not necessarily what makes me dislike anime as much. It's really more of like what is often portrayed in anime, and that's just because, to put it bluntly, like anime is just kind of horny. Like it is. It is. I'm not wrong. You know that. It's just like there's a lot of anime is well known for having. Anime is well known for being very sexualized. Like again, the word hentai itself is literally a Japanese word. So that's like the thing is like that's the thing that often I know what you're probably gonna say. Just let me say my piece. But like a lot of my anime, whenever I've just come across it randomly, because I don't ever really go looking for it. I just like see random animes or whatever, or people just talk about it or whatever. And then if I ever do any investigation into it, it's just always like weird and disturbing about some of the things that often are portrayed.
I do agree with you very, very strongly there. Yes, a lot of animes do exaggerate those kind of of specifically the female body, because they know that it will get people who are attracted to that sort of thing to click on it, and that's how they get views. And the content of it is just very borderline, and all it is just people who really enjoy that kind of look, and it is not in a healthy nor wholesome manner. And I agree that kind of style is not a very attractive kind of anime. However, that is not all of anime.
Yep, and I know that's what you're going to say, because there's good anime, which I don't disagree with. There is good anime. Which I don't disagree with, but again, those are just kind of like the things that kind of make me dislike anime. But I think what ultimately makes it unappealing to me is that I'm just more of a realist. And so what I mean by that is I generally want animation that I watch to look more realistic than not realistic. And so that's why even if there is like good anime, like Attack on Titan or Castlevania or things like that, I'm sure they're fine. And I've seen, like, for example, I've seen clips of Castlevania, and I thought, I could probably watch that and I would probably enjoy it. But the thing about like anime is that it's just so gnarly, I think is a good word, or kind of weird or a bit exaggerated in just many different forms, like especially like the fight scenes and stuff like that, because it's well known for being very super dynamic and flashy and colorful, and like like your eyes hurt from what you're seeing because you have like almost no idea what's going on because people are like going like this and
Flavor of you to say coming from someone who enjoyed Power Rangers as a kid.
I don't remember that actually. I moved out of that stage.
I remember watching Power Rangers at your house quite a few times.
Yeah, but I moved out of that phase, thankfully. That's the thing about anime is I'm just a realist, and so if I'm going to generally watch something that is more realistic than not. And so to just kind of show you what I mean,
I don't know if I want to see another anime girl.
It's not, thankfully. So this is just an example of something from a G.I. Joe Resolute movie, and so it's not necessarily my favorite style, but this is something I generally like more because it looks more realistic. It looks like real people, and anime people like don't look like real people, which is kind of the point, but that also kind of I just generally don't like that. And this also extends to what I call dumb animation. And to even as like a kid, I kind of noticed, or dumb cartoons. So this is what I call like dumb animation because to me, it always looked weird. Just as from Gravity Falls. And so Gravity Falls also started like its own type of cartoon animation style that has kind of dominated kids' cartoons. And like the kids' cartoons that I kind of grew up where, I mean, they're cartoons, but they were always like a bit more realistic oriented. And so this stuff just, even as a kid, I was like, this doesn't look realistic. And I want things to look more realistic than not realistic. And so that's kind of like the main thing for like with me, where anime's got like the weird visuals and like the way that people react and talk are just kind of strange. And I'd almost put like the word feminine in a certain sense because a lot of like the average animes like I've seen and peruse, they just like it's like super weird like what they deal with because like I'll use an example. I literally watched something. I picked a random episode from a random anime called, let's see, what was it called? UFO Ultra Maiden Valkyrie.
Oh boy.
Yeah, like again, it's very strange. And
give me the name again.
UFO Ultra Maiden Valkyrie. And like the episode that I watched, I didn't even finish it, but it's basically just like a weird like girls fight essentially between like nerds with glasses and like cat girls. The stories and the things I want to consume I want to be real in the sense that I want them to deal with like difficulty and real struggles and not like, oh, I'm sad because this lady doesn't like me or because we're dealing with issues. Like, yeah, everyone's dealing with issues, but like I kind of don't care about that type of thing. And so like it's not only realistic in terms of how I want them to look, I want them to look more like people and more realistic in just cartoons and kids cartoons and animation. But it's also like in what they're talking about in content and the things they're dealing with. And like I think you can even see this with like just like how anime deals with a lot of it's just not all anime is like immature in that sense, but it's just it's again kind of horny. It's kind of like it's just it's all about these guys who like find a lot of women who are attracted to them for some reason. It's things that kind of like I just don't care about. I want to deal with real issues, real struggles.
I think your sample size for anime is not quite large enough because there's so many animes out there and they do have that exact same thing that you are looking for. The only thing about it that you probably wouldn't like is the animation style. It is okay for you to not like the animation style. That is completely understandable. However, there is lots of animes out there. So many. I can name quite a few that I think that you would probably enjoy and that also have an animation style that you can also get behind because they are a little bit more realistic. I think the big billboard that you see anime portrayed on is not attractive because the type of people that you also see very heavily advocating for that are the 600-pound life guys that have Cheeto dust on their shirt and on their fingers still from last night, watching, and they have a body pillow of their favorite anime character.
In response to some of your arguments, Will, I have nothing against or for you. I simply want to put out an objective reality. Anime has made moves for 2D animators. There was a lot of different scenes that I had to study to attain my degree in animation that came from anime. I had to spend a lot of time looking at the Akira slide. That really got me to realize how much that's kind of the scene that is used to show animating on 1s, 2s, 3s, and the different action lines, parallax in different areas. Like it is useful. The techniques are very useful. There can be many variables in the style. There can be variables in the story. There are usually a lot of correlation with fantasy and unholy things with anime. So to anyone, you guys and our listeners, to just be careful discerning whatever you're watching. But yes, there is a lot that has been used from anime to teach about animation. On top of that, we have touched on it in a couple different episodes, and I've already talked about it here. This anime is one example of you cannot just translate a story to live action. They tried it with Cowboy Bebop. It was not well received. They're doing it now with One Piece. There is some acceptance to it.
The only acceptable One Piece is a swimsuit. My hot take.
Fair enough. But you need the story and the animation to work together. And on top of that, the different styles, I have something written down here about the different styles and how one style is not the correct style. So going to school for animation, you meet a lot of different people with a lot of different styles. Like, that's just how it is. People draw differently, people model differently, people have different ideas. That's the beauty of being at a liberal arts school, is that people have different ideas and different ways to execute them. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. In fact, it's highly encouraged to lean into your style, into something different, even if it's for the same story. If you're all given the same prompt, you should still use your own creativity to push that in your own style. Using animation as a storytelling method for, yes, possibly for the same story, but how can it enhance? That's the same. We can talk about this in cinematography for a different episode. Some of the best producers, directors, cinematographers will do the exact same thing with cinematography and visual effects as they do with animation and drawing every single frame, and how that enhances the story. I think we should talk about that more in depth with live action, because there are some directors who do it really well and just give you don't just feel like you're watching a story on a screen. You are watching a movie with a capital M, and you are invested in the story, not just because it's a story that's well written, but because it's told well through the medium that it's being portrayed in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, again, I'm the midwit here, so it's basically, I don't understand like the whole like cinematography or animation stuff. I won't get that, but what I will be able to do is like, I can go to different films and I can say, oh, this is a 2D animation, and I can in regards to style, I can say yay or nay. Like, yeah, I like this style, or I don't like how these really look, but that's okay. But that's different compared to the story. But
that is judging a book by its cover.
Yeah,
but then again, that is why a cover is there. You have a book and you have a cover. Whatever you want the book to like be judged for, you should probably put it on the cover.
Very fair.
If you have a book about a serial killer, you should make it look like a slightly murderer-esque type book cover.
We should do a rant on posters sometime, because movie posters have gone down the drain. Just floating head posters
now it's
are
just
not
explosions
cool.
of faces. Marvel ruined posters.
Marvel ruined post-credit scenes. Marvel ruined a lot of things.
I mean, which is funny because they kind of made post-credits. Not really made it, but like made it popular. But yeah, they did.
Marvel ruined comedy.
Bars.
Movie.
That's true, they did.
Bars. Spit all over my computer.
Marvel ruined movies.
I just want to give some examples before we finish up. As I was talking about enhancing the story, think about Josh, because you and I are the only two of the three of us who have seen Across the Spider-Verse. The scene where Gwen...
I thought you were telling him to think about me, and I'm like, aw.
I want you to think about the one scene in Across the Spider-Verse where Gwen makes up with her dad. That is one of the best ways I can think of to enhance the story through animation. Her world looked very blue and a lot of grays and gloomy until she made up with her dad and talked it out with him. And as soon as she hugs him, pinks and oranges explode from their hug, showing the almost freedom she feels from talking through it with her dad. Like, that's how you enhance a story. That's how you make people feel stuff through something that can't always be told through live action.
That scene went against nature. It made a man feel. We're not supposed to do that. Quick disclaimer. To anybody who has opinions contrary to our beliefs on anime, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to have your own thoughts, your own opinions on content. If you don't like what William has to say about anime, I know a lot of people like get really, really uptight about that. I honestly don't like anime enough for me to try and defend it, but I do know that there actually is good stuff out there. But also, I don't actually think everyone who likes anime is a 600-pound life person and has Cheeto dust on their fingers. I just want to make that clear. Whatever content you enjoy, whatever animation style you enjoy, that's your preference, and you are allowed to like that. And that's awesome. And I think that we need people in animation community to bring forth whatever they like in art. Animation is an art, and it's for people to put out the kind of content and the story writing and just give a picture to it that is tailored to them. Across the Spider-Verse or Into the Spider-Verse, that's their animation style. They have that kind of art, and they want to push that. Borderlands is another game that I think of that has a very distinct art style with having very abrupt edges to all of their character models. That's awesome. Same with Arcane, same with Disney, same with this new Wish that I just watched 20 minutes ago. Animation is an art, and if you don't like someone's art, that's okay. It's just like going to a painting and saying like, I'm not a huge fan of that kind of art. Even if it's modern art, it's art. And granted, it's not the greatest art, but art is art, and we should still be able to appreciate it, even if it's not your type.
I agree with what you say, Josh. The styles are not for everyone, and that's why we need variety. I would love to see an even different style than just the sketchy 2.5D type of style. Like, I know people who don't like Into the Spider-Verse style.
It's okay for them to be wrong. Honestly, you can sit in being wrong.
Yeah,
No,
people do it all the time.
You just said it was okay for them to not like it.
No, that's the only animation style that is not okay to not like.
Anyways, everyone has their own preference. Find the thing that you enjoy and talk about it. Make it fun. Enjoy it. And that's what
We're
we're
a
all
community. We commune.
I think I would basically just say what all you guys are saying. Again, I'm kind of like the midwit in certain circumstances when it comes to the technical side of like understanding all this jargon for animation and stuff. But when it comes
He's
to like
saying
art,
he's stupid.
but basically I would just say that, yeah, like there's different varieties of like arts and specifically about animations, and those can each be very useful in telling the story and being just beautiful in and of their own. Although I think I would also encourage people to not just enjoy a certain art style, but also aspire to be as good as you can with the art that you create, and to not just make it for anything meaningless. Because there's a lot of like, I'll put it bluntly, like there's a lot of really good artists who make pornography. And that really annoys me because whenever I see certain images that I'm like, technically speaking, this is very good, but just what it's portraying is not good. But I can see that this person is clearly talented. I get very disappointed because that's basically it's like a corruption of what is good. And like, in the Bible or whatever, it talks about how God creates and is builder and an artist like that. And so each of us have that spark of creativity and imagination and the ability to create stuff. And so my call would just be that artists, if you're a hobbyist, like I like to draw, I'm not the best drawer, but I like to draw, do your best, train and enjoy it. But at the same time, do it for the glory of God, if you're a Christian, and for all people, I'd say, but just also for the glory of humanity and for the betterment of the human soul. That is the point of art, to portray that which is good and to further lift people up, not tear society and individuals down.
Bars.
Bars.
All right. With that said, thank you guys so much for listening or watching. Remember, YouTube episodes go up on Saturdays, day after the audio episode. Follow us on all our socials, linked in the description. Get connected with a community that's a lot of fun, and we're nerds sometimes. Thank you all for joining us today. Know that you are loved, and God bless.
Peace out, brethren.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.